All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to the order the Thursday, August 10th, 2023 Watertown City Planning Commission meeting. Get the right paperwork here. Can I get a roll call?
Yes, Brink.
Here.
Kays.
Here.
Dolly.
Here.
Aletsky.
Present.
Hanson.
Here.
Culhane.
Here.
And Ford, Spire, and Dargis Johnson are absent. We do have a quorum, and it is just a majority vote for an approval or for a recommendation.
Third item on the agenda is an invitation for public comment, participant submittal. If anybody wants to speak on an item that's not on the agenda, you can sign up with Brandy, and then we'll have time for that at the end.
And can I ask quick, Jana, did the gentleman that was going to ask about a mobile home, do you see him? Okay.
Okay, we'll move on. Item 4 on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Could I make a modification here? Sorry.
Yes, Brandy?
Could we move C to the top of the agenda? It's a public hearing item that might not need as much. Yeah, if we could do that, that'd be great.
Mr. Chair, move to approve the agenda, placing item C above items A and B.
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll move forward with the modified agenda. Item 5 on the agenda is 5A is the approval of the minutes from the July 20th meeting.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Those will carry. Then moving into item 6C on the regular agenda here.
You want me to take it away?
Yeah, go ahead and walk us through that, Brandy.
Okay. Thank you, Blake. So this is a rezone request for the DNR addition. If you recall, this is over just north of Lou's Fireworks, and that we had annexed and zoned the property here to the west last year. I have it highlighted there. And so now the property here on the north, it is zoned I-2 currently. Let me get back to this map. They're proposing to rezone that to I-1, and then it will combine with a portion of this lot here. And then a replat will be coming forward as well, which will separate these into two lots. But right now, we're just looking at the rezone. It is conforming to the I-1 district and it would meet its own it would be its own platted lot and meet the requirements necessary as is as well. So with that, I'll stand by for questions.
Brandy, does the remainder of the I-2 lot meet zoning ordinances?
It actually already doesn't.
When it was brought into the city, it never did, I don't think. Isn't that correct?
Because you need, okay, wow, I'm sorry. I had that wrong. So there's 342,000 square feet there, and you need 220,000 in the I-1. And with this rezone, we're taking away, let me get there. We're taking away 82,000, so we're still good with being conforming there. Sorry, I got that messed up for,
Because it's 5 acres for the I-2?
yes.
All right, with that, I will open the public hearing on this. Is there anybody here to speak on behalf or against?
Is that on? My name's Don Roby, 572 South Lake Drive. I represent R&R Holdings LLC. R&R Holdings LLC, our intention in working with the owners of this land we're talking about today is to effect a reconfiguration and do a land swap. The land that R&R Holdings owns is adjacent to the Glacial Lakes Rubber and Plastic Plant, which we own that land also. We're looking down the road for expansion. In working with the owners of Lou's Fireworks, we found a way to reconfigure the land so our plant wouldn't go all the way to Highway 212. Our plant would stay north of that and then go probably east. And then that owner of this, current owner of this land would then combine the frontage road together. So it's just a reconfiguration to allow for expansion of a manufacturing plant, so it's not on the highway. It also does give us access to the east. So I just wanted, if you have any questions, I thought I'd be available.
Thank you, sir. Any questions?
Class of 80 land swap.
Any other comments from the public?
Sorry.
I did want to ask, Brandy, maybe it's a question for you, or just a comment that we can discuss as the board. There's a couple notes in here regarding nonconformance to the comprehensive land use plan. And that was something that I looked at as well. I do think that this, in general, was maybe an oversight when we put together that future land use map that you're pointing out in your notes here in the packet. It did call this area out as pure commercial, despite the fact that it has been and continues to be a mixed commercial and industrial area, and we foresee that in the future too, especially with the expansion of the Terex facility and everything we got going on with the Calvin addition down there, and then on the east side as well. I do think that, you know, coming out of this, we should probably take an action to update that map and maybe file an addendum with that comprehensive land use plan.
Noted. Yeah, and we just present the facts.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and basically, I think it's, the proper motion, if we move forward on that, would be to at a point in the future, looking at amending it, because we can't do that today.
If there's nobody else in the public, I'll close the public hearing and we'll look for a motion by the board.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any additional discussion on that? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote.
Kulhane.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Aletsky.
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes.
Kays.
Yep.
Brink.
Yes.
Unanimous yes, that will pass. And then moving on to item 6A on the regular agenda. Brandy?
Thank you, Blake. So this is an annexation and zoning request for a piece of property on the northwest side of Lake Compesca. It is currently owned by Janie Schuchard, Shane Schuchard, and Shannon York. And then the petitioners, Colt and J.C. Rushink, who are here before you today petitioning to bring this piece of property, if I can get to it, into a portion of this piece of property into city limits. So they would be looking at 18.68 acres. If this would keep up as well here. So bringing in this east 18.86 acres of the entire piece of property here, and bringing it in as CL Lake Commercial District. And this area is within the boundary maps of a CL Lake Commercial District, and then also meets the minimum square footage as is required is 10,000 square feet, and these they are 813,700 square feet. And then about 1,200, 1,300 linear feet of frontage. So with that, I'll stand by with any questions.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
remind me, Brandy, currently there's a single-family home on that property, and are single-family homes a permissible use in the CL district?
They are.
Thank you.
I just wanted to know for the record that I'm going to recuse myself and join the public.
Thank you, Mr. Culhane. Before I open the public hearing, I did want to just make a statement here, because I know there's going to be people that want to speak in the public about this. I did want to keep the discussion and keep our actions here today focused on what's in front of the board, which is annexation and zoning consideration. I just wanted to be clear that, you know, this board does not govern how or when natural or artificial waterways are developed, nor do we govern or regulate water conveyance. There's numerous local, state, and federal agencies and laws and organizations with those specific directives. What we're looking at from a board standpoint with annexation and zoning, with the approval of development concepts, does not grant a carte blanche to a developer. They still need to follow all those laws and regulations. They still need to seek approvals from the relevant organizations where necessary, such as the Department of Natural Resources. So what we've got in front of us here is annexation and zoning, and we're considering the things that are, important from an annexation standpoint, such as infrastructure support, being contiguous to the city limits. Does it have building rights once zoned? Is it the appropriate zoning based on our comprehensive land use plan and our ordinance book? Those kind of considerations. So at this point, I will open the public hearing.
Brandy, real quick, can I ask, will this this area of land, will it be required to have a concept plan at a future date, or will there need to be a concept plan, or?
It will all depend on how they plan to subdivide. If they subdivide it into more than 5 lots, then they would have to do the subdivision process.
Thank you.
Public hearing is open if anybody's here to speak on behalf or against. We'll take comments for both the annexation and zoning, but we'll take action on those separately.
Sure. Hi, my name is JC Stafford-Rushink. I'm part of who's applying today. We live directly across from the property that we are looking to annex in. To give some more clarity, I guess, where we're at, and I understand completely, like, the moving into CL is just kind of, it's such a broad, kind of scary thing, I think, around the lake right now. There's a lot of ambiguity, which I completely understand. Colt and I were married across the street on this land. Our good friend who passed away lived there with his wife, Janie. We've known him for years. He's been a family friend of the family for as long as Colt can remember. For us, this is, a lot of a sentimental value for us too. We have great stock and skin in the game, and for this not to be a nuisance, we're not really looking, to I guess the word development, as far as like people might think like huge apartments, casinos, like Dollar General. That's not our intention whatsoever. We're looking, there's a lot of established tree lines on this property behind a very thick one in the back where it starts to fade into the agricultural land that is currently used. We were looking to build a structure where we could have cold storage, where you wouldn't see it from the road, you wouldn't see it from the neighbors, you wouldn't see it from our home. But because it is adjacent to city boundaries, in order to build anything on that property, we would have to annex in. Otherwise, that probably wouldn't necessarily be something that we would have pursued, but we definitely want to follow the rules. It's not a ask for forgiveness later kind of situation, and that is something that we want to be able to do with the property what we want to, and still we have a lot of passion for preserving the, I guess, how it looks across the street from us. We're good friends with we have friends that are neighbors, and I have a young child. We plan on having more children. We want the place to be preserved the way that we love it, and yet be usable and have a bit of responsible development on there, sure. But that is kind of where we're at right now.
Thank you for that. Is there questions?
I'm sorry, I have one question. Where are these 5 lots going to be?
No,
no, I can't.
They only have to go through the concept plan or the subdivision process if they would subdivide it into 5 lots. But as it's shown today, it's going to be 1 lot, but that would be the only reason they would have to do a concept plan, like Jeff asked.
Yeah, we're not looking to divide. The only thing that we were dividing is just so that we could, like, where we'd want to build that protected area for storage around the lake, where people could put, right now, there's a lot of, even us personally, but neighbors have like your lifts, your whatever it may be, and don't have a place to necessarily put that off of your own property. And it would be beneficial for us to be able to have somewhere that is out of sight but safe to store some of those things that are still very local and, easy to access.
Yes, sir.
So you're saying that your at least intermediate plan is to construct some sort of a storage unit on the west side of that north-south shelter belt?
Yep, where, if you can part right here, right? Or over here, sorry. Yes, yep.
Right in there. And then I also had heard a rumor, and you know, and rumors are just that, rumors. Somebody had said to me that they had heard that you were looking at maybe doing some sort of a wedding venue as another maybe long-term plan.
Correct. And venue might be.
I don't know.
Yeah, right, yeah. As far as building, as we're talking about structures go, that was the only, structure that we have intended for why we were annexed in this situation. We were married over there, yes. We would like to allow weddings there, that we were married there. We, the following weekend, Chuck and Janie were married under the arbor that still stands that we have on this sweet little pond hill overlooking it. I understand like some of the, and maybe this isn't exactly what we're getting at tonight, but just to address some of the concerns. If there were to be a wedding, we do have planned parking for behind the trees in the back, and that we would have, there's not going to be on the street, any of those things. And if there were to be a band or something of the nature music, it would be set back. The closest place that we would allow for them to set up would be 400 feet from the nearest residential area. There's already a very established tree line that buffers quite a bit of noise. I can only, anecdotally speak from my perspective of Chuck used to have parties across the street, and he would have a neighborhood party. And while we lived there still, and I couldn't hear it from my own land.
Yeah, I guess where I was going with it, I wasn't looking for
Sure.
a full detailed explanation, but it was just something that
Of course.
I had heard, and if that's where you're going with it, then that's fine too.
Yeah, at present, it's not like a bona fide, we're building, like people might think of like Country Road Barn or something like that, where people have built like an entire venue. Again, we want to preserve kind of this hallmarky space across, I know that's not really a planning commission term, however, across the street from us, we want to still have that visual appeal. It would be a bare grounds place where people could set up a tent and like we did, and we still would have all of that land still looking the way that we enjoy it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. I guess I have a couple questions for city staff. I know when it comes to the west side of our lake, we always kind of have some concerns with utilities and their capabilities. Well, do we have enough water, sewer, et cetera, to serve an 18-acre lot right here? I see
We
birds
did-
coming up.
Okay, I was gonna say, we did not hear anything back, and I believe that it's more towards the north where we have those issues, but we'll let Mark speak. Or
From
Bert.
the-
I can try to.
From the wastewater standpoint, no, there's no concern with serviceability here for wastewater at this time.
Thank you.
Hi, Bert with the utilities. Electric's no problem. It's already in our service territory. As for the water, it's in the Clark Rural Water Service Territory. We might have a small issue if, I'm not sure, I didn't check if that house is served by us or Clark Rural Water. If it's served by Clark Rural Water, odds are it's going to always be served by them unless Clark Rural Water and the owner can come to some kind of an agreement, then that's fine. As for gas, we should be fine. This isn't a big manufacturing site or something like that. It's just a little bit of heat load here and there, and if it's going to be units, storage units, probably not going to be heated anyway. So I don't anticipate any issues for the utilities.
If it were to develop on the CL into a more high-density usage, would that be a concern?
Once again, until I see what it is, I can't say yay or nay. I doubt it's going to be anything that big.
Okay.
Bert, if I may, before you duck out, in my past dealing with the previous property owner, I know there was just a private well on that piece of property. Is that, I don't remember how that agreement works with Clark Rural Water versus city water. If the property is annexed into town, do you guys have to sign an agreement with them, or will it always just be served by Clark?
It's a little different with Clark Rural Water than Rural Water. Rural Water, we actually have an agreement in place that there's fees that are exchanged when things get put in. And with Rural Water, if the property is already served, like that one house, that's theirs forever. Unless they can come to an agreement between the owner and Rural Water to do something different, that's fine. We do not have that type of agreement with Clark. So as far as I know, is once it gets annexed, it will become our territory, except what they already serve. And we would just have to cross that bridge, and there would have to be some discussions to see how they want to continue. Maybe they don't want it anymore. I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I have one other question for city staff. We have a lot of developments that end up with like half streets, or would a development adjacent to 169th Street here, would they be required to do any upgrades to the street itself?
Heath, do you want to take that one? Or, so what, they will annex and zone half of the right-of-way, and on this situation, unless it were being extended to a full city street, I would say a waiver of right to protest, but
Yeah, I would agree. I have not researched this. I don't know if the assistant city engineer has, to even know. I assume that's a gravel road there, but I can't tell in the aerial.
It is.
Okay. So, yeah, some type of a waiver right to protest. What we don't have right now and what we're needing is to establish a policy as a city on what we do with these, what I call these fringe areas and the streets associated with them. We've actually been in conversation with some of the townships recently, the engineering staff and the development staff have. And, but to get a clear set of policies on when we take a full width right away, for example, versus a half width, when we do a waiver right to protest, or when we require paving or building of the road, or when we require money or a monetary contribution for that construction of the road in the future. There's all these options, but we just simply don't have a policy that says when to do each one of those. This one, to me, in looking at it, it makes most sense to do what Brandy cited as an example, a waiver of right to protest, any assessed cost for future road improvements at the point in time in the future when and if that gravel road ever gets improved. I think that you can look at these things circumstantially and come to those, what I'd call common sense conclusions that, it makes sense when you need to require a road be built and when it doesn't. And in this point in time, I would say this one's not going to be built in any time in the near future. So it wouldn't make sense for the requiring the owner to build their half-street section or pay us for that half-street section. But do require at minimum that they waive the right to protest any kind of an assessment in the future for those costs.
Maybe it's on information you guys have. We did talk about taking or building an access road out of, sorry, give me the.
169.
On 169th, that would go to that back area where we would have storage so that it's not disruptive of people accessing it through the main kind of neighborhood area. I do have one question, or we have one question as it pertains to annexation into the city. There is a beautiful horse barn that Chuck had built there, and that's where I learned to train my first horse, and we would like to still maintain that and have our horses across the street and maybe a couple friends boarding there. If we were to annex into the city, is that still permissible?
In the CL zone, how does that apply? Are stables, commercial stables, a permissible use in the CL?
So they were, actually, I had this figured out too. That's actually only allowable in the agricultural district. However, I believe it falls into, because all the things that they would like to continue on the property would have been allowed. So I think if it fell under either service establishment or recreation facility. And then two, when you have horses, you need to have, gosh, let me pull that up. Because you can't have horses, you can't have other hooved animals within city limits.
Horses, but no cows.
Yeah, or pigs.
Sheep, goats.
We're gonna just look up.
But you can have,
because
but
that's how. So excluding horses, no, okay, and then it talks about horses. So you can have stables in R1, R2, or any residential district with the exception of any service animal.
You're saying I can't have my service goat?
just the parrot.
Unless signatures by petition of 100% of the adjoining landowners and 50% of the landowners within 300 feet of the same shall have signified approval.
But we don't list CL as a place for horses when we are listing them specifically in R1, R2, R3, and R4, and we have them listed in the ag zone by their mere omission in the other zones, thereby making them prohibited. That's not a legal opinion. There is a judge in the room formally, but that's how my approach has always been.
So, how I've always interpreted it was that unless
If the use is not listed, it's not allowed is generally the,
any R, so that's only residential.
but you also list horses and to be allowed in the ag zone as well. And so by the mere listing of those animals in those specific zones and the omission in the other zones, there, in my opinion, in my history, and my 30-year experience has been that they are thereby not allowed in those other zones without specifically stating them.
Okay, I'm gonna,
I mean, you could get a legal opinion from your city attorney, but
that's not what I'm doing. I'm looking at an email.
but today, that's where I would be at it, unless I'm told otherwise.
I'm gonna look back because I had, because all the things that they wanted to address here, just one moment.
We have had a couple other, farms that were absorbed into the city over the years, so those would have presumably been residential zoned as they were brought in. They're kind of surrounded by residential properties.
Which that would allow in this
Right.
situation, but this is our first lake commercial.
Yeah.
Where
Sure.
When we looked at
It's
CL,
tricky
didn't
because we
look at
don't really
this.
know, like, there wasn't really an in-between thing for us to apply for within that. It's kind of, if we wanted to build a storage space that people could reasonably rent space, that's kind of where we were like, well, what would be our options to still use it essentially as Chuck did, and maintain exactly what it is, as well as just like that little spot be able to.
theoretically, I guess you could also make an argument that the horses are on the ground the day that you annex them in. They don't meet the regulations of the ordinances are, so they're technically possibly grandfathered in. Now, those would be your houses. If I'm going to be renting space out to other people and their horses, that's more of a commercial act, which therefore could maybe
Fair.
fall under the recreation facility as listed.
Yeah, it was all good questions, and I
I don't know. I mean, that's a tough question, and probably I would defer to city legal counsel on how that would be taken up. I don't think we can answer that for you today.
I mean, my personal thought is, yeah, that'd be legal non-conforming until you decide to build something, which if you are planning to build something with a storage unit, then they're no longer allowed.
You might have to pick and choose your battle.
Right.
We do have the public hearing open. Is there anybody else that wants to speak in the public here?
Sorry, tripping on my leash.
Oops, kilt.
Hi, my name is Jill Feist. I live 4 or 5 houses, lots down from the entrance to the Shukart property. I'm confused, I truly am. The information that we got in the mail from the city said 55 acres, and now we're looking at 15. And where'd the change come about from that? And then there's also I do not understand, and it hasn't been explained here, what the advantage would be to annex this property in for what they want to do compared to leaving it with the county.
Well, I think I can answer the county question, is that the county's not going to let them do much of anything other than what's there today. First of all, they'd have to have 35 acres, they're talking 18, to have buildable rights in the county. The county does not allow for those wedding venues to be happening. The county does not allow for private commercial storage facilities to be built in properties that aren't zoned commercial. The county is more than likely not going to rezone that property commercial for that purpose. So what their intended use is for, I have done pretty close knowledge because I know the guy that's the zoning officer. They would not allow any of the things that they're wanting to do in the county.
Okay, and I'm also looking at the road that goes around the lake, North Lake Drive, South Lake Drive. It's a mess. And to add this additional burden on it, wow, it's frightening to think. I mean, I drive a small car, and I have to keep my teeth clenched when I drive because otherwise I could crack a tooth easily. And that's just an additional burden. And if the city's going to take care of it, fine, but they haven't. And I hope to live long enough to see that they would, but I don't know that that will happen. I am against it, truly am against the annexation.
Thank you.
So can I clarify this horse ordinance?
Yes, Brandy?
So it doesn't speak on other districts. It's just saying you cannot have them in residential.
I don't think this is the time or place to be discussing whether something is allowed or not allowed at this point. The discussion is whether they annex. It's their choice to make,
That does impact what they're wanting to do.
but I don't think we as a board can tell you, yes, you can put horses there or not, because I think there's a whole question of what the ordinance says. None of us are attorneys at this table. I can just tell you, from my experience, horses would not be allowed based upon my interpretation of hundreds of zoning regulations over the course of my professional career, based upon how this has been explained to
Okay,
me.
well, all right, we'll consult our legal counsel prior.
The question for the applicant is, with that open question out there, do you want to move forward with us taking action tonight?
We can get that answer before it would go to city council.
Sure.
Okay.
And how I read the ordinance is different than how Commissioner Kays does.
And I'm not arguing, I'm just saying that's just my interpretation.
Yeah, I
Yep.
generally defer to city council or to city attorney in regards to those things, so.
Is there, questions I just have is like, are we looking at a situation if we'd want to maintain having an equine facility there that you're looking to like cookie cutter out another area to like not annex in that whole area? Are we starting to jigsaw it out? I mean, does that make sense? Or,
I see what
you
you're
know,
saying there.
The equine facility would be a permissible use in the county's zoning regulations. And it's very clear there.
yeah.
But I don't know, again, what your plan is, what your long-range plan is. If it means, can I have horses there today and the property's not zoned agriculture?
Certainly,
I don't know the answer to that
I
question.
think that moving forward with how it's petitioned today, and then we will get legal interpretation. But what JC's saying is that if they're going to only annex in a portion of this property then, because they only need 10,000 square feet, so they can leave some of it in the county still. And then, because the main catalyst for this is to be able to have storage units, and they cannot get a building permit when it's in the county.
But the part of the problem is there too, if they reduce that legal description to less than 35 acres, they lose their residential building right in the county.
Okay,
So I just want.
but there's still remaining land.
The house would have to be on a 35-acre parcel in the county because currently that's the building right.
Yeah, so they have 54 acres there right now. So they would
What
just
was
have to
the 18
retain
acres What was
35.
the 18 acres that was being talked about then?
That is what we're looking at annexing.
Okay. But they
So
would still retain the other acreage?
35.
Thank you, I didn't
Yes.
understand that.
Yes.
So what we've got in front of us today is the 18 acres. That's what we can act on. If you get opinion by, the legal counsel in the interim, I think you could back out prior to city council and come back with an alternate proposal if you didn't want to move forward as presented today.
And also, I want to discuss with Heath too about the street, if they plan to have main access off of 169th, if that impacts what needs to be done to 169th, and how that impacts. And we can discuss that offline too. But that, just trying to be fully transparent of learning that information of how they would access it.
And certainly that's something that you guys would take up during the building permit process, right? So today, we're looking at the annexation and the zoning. I do have the public hearing open. Is anybody else here to speak in the public?
My only reason for bringing that up is just same thing with the horses. It's another impact that could change which way the applicant wishes to go.
I'm Mary Modica. My husband and I, Doug and I, live at 786 North Lake Drive, which is directly across the street from the Suchard driveway. And we are opposed to having this land brought in as a CL zoning district to become part of the city. And I'm going to speak for myself just briefly, and then I was asked to read something that some other neighbors have prepared who are not able to be here. So the things that are, there are many things that are deep concern about this to us, but one of them is that much as we like our neighbors, we have no way, and no one has any way of knowing how long they will own that property. You cannot predict the future. And my understanding is that the 9 privileges that are given when you bring the property into the zoning of a CL would travel right along with the land to whoever bought it. And while their ideas, Colt and J.C.'s ideas, seem nice, we don't know that a future owner would have those same desires of what they would do with that property. And some of the things that are allowable automatically when you zone CL would be horrible to us. We would not like it at all. And so that's a concern for us. We also have a concern about drainage, and the properties along North Lake Drive that are above us, uphill from us, their water off of North Lake Drive and from their own properties drain towards us. And there is a city culvert on our property that goes across into the Suchard property to take care of that water. And it has been difficult in a number of ways through the last years to keep that culvert open. The city does not maintain it. It sits there and gets filled up. And if whoever is on the other side of the road doesn't care to do their part in personally taking care of it, then we lose the correct drainage of our land. And it's a concern to us that it's not only our property that drains, it's all the properties above us that drain down through that culvert. And so we want to bring that into the attention of the Planning Commission here of, it's very easy when you're out on the edge of town to, maybe any place, I don't know, to not necessarily observe all of the things that should happen and where water moves. And we're concerned also about the fact that there are some wetlands on that property that are fed back and forth from the water coming down our hill. And we really want that to be maintained and not become an issue in the future of anybody wanting, I'm not saying Colt and J.C. at all, I'm saying about any owner, gradually changing that to not be a receptive wetland for
Yeah, and
drainage.
I can appreciate those sentiments and agree with protection of wildlife areas. However, I just want to point out what I mentioned previously is that this board does not govern wetlands or water conveyance. So there are organizations for that. There are laws and development requirements that cover that. That's not part of what we govern as a board. We don't set those policies or laws.
Well, thank you for listening to the concern. The other thing that I would say for us that is a concern is, maybe I've covered it well enough already, but it is the future ownership of the property. And we have no way of knowing how soon that could happen or who it would happen with and what they would want to do. It could become something very different from what it is now with a different owner. I was also asked to read a piece written by others in the neighborhood, and it's brief, and I'll just read it verbatim. It does not necessarily reflect the opinions that my husband and I would hold, but they are definitely concerns within the group who live along North Lake Drive. And this was written up by Eric and Melissa Muller, who are, would be 784, I think, North Lake Drive. And they say, unfortunately, not all in the neighborhood are able to attend today's meeting, but wanted to make aware some concerns shared in the neighborhood. We really don't want to see this property rezoned to commercial. But if it's going to happen, having our neighbors be the ones to develop it is the best we could hope for. We want to see them succeed, and we trust them to operate a business that complements the neighborhood and this community. However, the uncertainty of all of the uses that are allowed in the Lake Commercial District brings concerns. It would be nice if the zoning would only be allowed as long as Colt and J.C. own it. If that can't be done, it is hopeful that you can limit what businesses are allowed on this property and how they are operated more so than is provided in the Lake Commercial District. Rather than zone this lake commercial, could this property be assigned as a planned unit development so that the businesses planned by Colt and J.C. are the only ones allowed and will be run in the fashion that they plan? It would also give the best chance to plan that the sewer, water, and electrical demands of this property remain similar to the original plans of our neighbors. It would give us a little more comfort on how the open spaces and water will be managed into the future as well, especially if this property changes hands in the future. Again, we don't want to see this property zoned commercial, but if it is, we hope that you will consider amending the request to a district like the planned unit development that can narrow some of the uses allowed on this property and ensure that the vision Colt and J.C. have gets carried out, not only by them, but future owners as well. Thanks for listening, Eric and Melissa Muller. And I can't really answer questions on that because I don't know anything about it, so,
Thank you for that.
okay. Thank you.
Did we have others in the public here?
Hi there, Brian Brandrate here. I live directly across the road from this property as well. We've seen a fair amount of storage kind of going up around the lake. I personally am one of the people who never seem to have enough storage. I understand what these people are saying about some of the changing it to CL and whatnot, but on the other hand, I feel like I want to see the good in everybody come out, and I feel like anybody who gets in business, they're just trying to do good for themselves and for their families and the community. I don't really share the fear in that. I think we need more storage around the lake. I don't see any issue with it, I guess. The one thing I didn't quite agree with, you talked about that road, they'd have to sign off basically saying that if road need to be widened or improved or whatever, that they'd have to agree that they wouldn't contest that. That seemed a little bit much. It's a gravel road. They're going to be accessing it, I would say, fairly limited. It would have to get awfully big before I think that would be a concern personally. So, I mean, if it was me applying, I would be a little skittish to sign off on kind of basically signing an open check to a certain extent. There may be some middle ground there, but thank you.
Thank you.
Heath, quick question. So in the event, the property does get annexed and we annex only to the center of the road, and is that Lake Township or what township that is? Who does the maintenance on that several hundred feet of road? Who's running the blade? Who's putting the gravel down?
So to go along with that policy that we don't have, we also need a shared roads maintenance agreement that I've also seen work well in other communities. And what that would do is it would describe exactly that, who's maintaining these shared roads on the fringes of a growing community. And whether it's the township, whether it's the county, whether it's the state, whether it's the city, it spells everything out clearly. And there's usually some trade-offs in those. Usually it's in the form of a memorandum of understanding, a shared roads maintenance agreement. And there's some give and take where, we know either the county or the township's maintaining this already. There's not a huge impact here based on the current uses. They'll continue to go ahead and maintain that because it doesn't make sense to send our plow down that little stretch of road for it. So long story short, I don't know the answer to that right here, right now.
We don't have an agreement in place currently with any of the townships or counties on how roads are brought into the city, how they are subsequently maintained or anything. I mean, it's a piece of work that we need to be working on.
Correct, and it's been occurring on an as-needed basis.
Just case by case.
Yeah, case by case. We do have, there's one formal agreement we do have to the south, but it was only because of the impacts of the landfill traffic. We do have an agreement with that township on certain roads down there, but other than that, I'm not aware of any formal agreements. But something that definitely would benefit all those parties, including the city. So we'll continue to keep that on the list and try to get it higher on the list sooner than later.
In terms of the waiver of right to protest, that's pretty standard that we do that on developments where we don't need an immediate improvement to the infrastructure. And those can, it could potentially be decades down the line before you ever need that. Those generally, though, are triggered by substantial development in the area that would drive the need for the infrastructure, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Building permit.
Yeah, there are a lot of circumstances that could drive the determination of the actual reconstruction of that road, but the waiver right to protest at least puts any action of needing the road to be rebuilt to a point, some point in the future. Because tomorrow we don't need this thing paved. It's a gravel road. Their proposed uses aren't going to impact it negatively or adversely. We're not annexing in the north side. It's all rural activity around there. So it's not checking any of the boxes that says, hey, you got to build us a half a street section here or pay for that right now today because it's going to happen in the next 5-10 years.
And hopefully our policy is that we,
Yeah,
realistically,
correct.
isn't that what we're really hoping though too, that we only build a full street if that means the city has to eat the cost for that half of the street until it gets, the north side develops? I mean, I think that's something we also need to be considering as well,
Correct.
that we're just not building half streets anymore.
Correct.
Is there?
So the waiver right to protest is a way to at least acknowledge that with any annexation into the city in the development process, it's the adjacent landowners to these roadways that pay their way, if you will, with the improvement of those roadways. With any barren land that gets developed, it's the developer that builds those roads. It's not the city that comes in and builds those roads, it's the developer. And with any improvements to current roads, it's the adjacent landowner typically that pays their front footage cost or share of that road improvement. That's the standard development process.
I don't think we necessarily tie a specific dollar value to the improvements on when that trigger is reached, but do you apply some sort of standard to that?
I'm not sure I'm following, Mr. Chairman.
So in terms of when you pull that trigger and improving the infrastructure there, so, I know for instance, we've approved building permits without requiring the infrastructure improvements, and we've done waiver of right to protest, and we've even done that for multiple landowners along a roadway. What then drives the trigger to come back and say, okay, now's the appropriate time to do the road?
I think that, that's driven more by the use and the development. I apologize, I think my mic keeps cutting out on me here. I'm having mic issues, but for those online that aren't hearing me clearly, we'll work on that in the room for future meetings. Really what would drive that, though, is the development around that roadway and the use of that roadway, either immediately adjacent to it or some extent further down the road that might be driving the need for pavement. And again, you put a common sense factor in there too on what makes sense. So it's not necessarily really a threshold of front footage or a cost estimate that comes into play. It's more what makes sense based on the development that's occurring.
Does there need to be a certain percentage that have waiver of right protest? Like, for instance, that we'll have 50% because we'll have the whole south half of this road, but we'll have none of the north half of this road. Would we be able to pull the trigger and make the street go in with that, or?
Well, so in that case, we would want the north half because we would want the full street section to get built all at once. So again, that's where the timing of it would have to come into play, where the north half has been annexed, or we at least get the north half of the right-of-way within the city. So we build the full street section all at once. Does that answer your question?
But then we can't assess it until the north half would come in. So the city would hold that cost. So that's where it's a very tedious
Yeah, and I
timeframe.
mean, it's 18 and a half acres of land that has apartments as an approved list. I mean, in theory, if this gets approved tonight, goes through 2 city council meetings and the 20-day referendum period, 55 days from now, they could build 400 apartments.
But hopefully,
I'm not saying that she will, but she could,
hopefully
sell
then
it
they
or
would
something.
access it off of the paved street to the east.
But with that many apartments, there would have to be multiple accesses, and 169th would probably for surely be one of those. And I just would,
Those are exactly the development considerations we would be giving to the condition of whether we would require that be paved or not. You're exactly right.
I like the statement about it's driven by the use, right? So if you're going to have a use that's, consistent with high traffic patterns that would justify it, that is the reason that you would pull that trigger and move forward.
Mr. Chair, with this, I mean, if we approve the annexation, is that memorialized with the property? Or again, if this piece of property is sold in 2 years, what is the next owner responsible for?
That runs with the land. So, and we would memorialize that at the time of plating, which is usually the need to plat. Well, we do require it after it is annexed and zoned, and then because they would need that prior to building permit issuance, and then that's when we would memorialize a waiver of right to protest and look at what they're planning on developing and then what is required at that point. And that's why we just wanted to bring it up where, and as Heath stated, we don't have a policy for it, but it is, again, like it is case by case, where if they want to be accessing it from the north, well, that's something that we'll have to consider as far as what improvements are needed.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I can make one last point of clarity regarding the waiver right to protest. It's simply a form that makes that assessment process easier. By state statute, the city has the authority to make public improvements adjacent to property and assess those costs back to the adjacent property owner. What the waiver of right to protest does, it just simply helps alleviate any potential protest of those improvements. But still, the city, by state statute, has the right to perform them. And as long as the adjacent property is receiving benefit from said improvements, we have the complete legal right to assess those costs back to them.
Yeah, thank you for that clarity.
But that's only on both sides, if both sides are in the city. If one's in the county or the township, you don't have the ability to impose that on the county or township resident.
Correct. That's true. We cannot assess until they're annexed. Yeah.
I do have the public hearing open yet if there's anybody else that wanted to speak.
I'm John Sperry. I live directly across the street. The mailbox for that property is on my land. And I'm in favor of Colton J.C.'s vision for what they want to do. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Anybody else while we have the public hearing open? Anybody online? Seeing none and hearing none, I'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to begin by making a motion to pass resolution number 2023-24, the annexation.
We have a motion for approval of the annexation
Second.
in a second. Any discussion on the annexation before we take the vote?
My basic assumption has always been if there are people that want to annex property into the city of Watertown and begin paying taxes and expanding the tax base for the city, I don't know why the city would necessarily want to say no to that unless maybe it's a bomb factory or something that's right next door to town that we don't want. But in this situation, I don't see any downside for the annexation of property into the city.
Yeah, I think some of the other things that we look at is it contiguous to the city limits, which of course this property is. Is it large enough to have building rights, which it is? Does it have infrastructure adjacent to it or being part of the proposed development? This does have infrastructure. So I think it checks all the boxes.
Okay, my question is, right now, we're just voting on annexing it in. We are not talking about the zoning yet.
That'll be the next action.
Okay, thanks.
Any additional discussion? Take a roll call on the annexation.
All right, Brink,
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
Oletsky,
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries. Next, we have the zoning, so 2023-25, if we can get a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the rezoning.
Do I have a
Or
second?
to assign the zoning, not rezoning, assign the zoning. Resolution 23-25.
I have a motion by Kays. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Again, I make the motion to approve based upon the land in question, the policy of the existing zoning ordinance that has identified a quarter-mile buffer around the lake as eligible areas to be rezoned. I think it's also fairly consistent with the comprehensive land use plan. And based upon that, that's my reasoning for the motion.
I think a lot of discussion went into the CL Lake District and what uses were relevant to that district. It's been through multiple rounds of public discourse. It's been through the city council. It was developed specifically for this area, so for all those reasons, I would support it.
I have a question. Okay, one of the people had a question, why not put it as a PUD? Because PUDs do allow storage garages, those rental garages. We did that north of Hanson Moran's building.
Yeah, and while that is true, we created the CL district expressly for this purpose around the lake, and so I'm going to vote in favor of CL district.
And just to follow up, Mr. Chair, just to follow that up, if the applicant felt that that's what they wanted to do, they still could withdraw their application before, but they're not asking for the PUD at this time. If they wanted to, they could say, I'm not seeing it, maybe we want to pull this back, make our neighbors feel a little bit better, and tell them exactly what we're going to be doing, and they could do that. And theoretically, if it was to zone C3, and if they decide 6 months from down the road they want to rezone it to PUD, they could still do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they don't have to withdraw it. They could still, because they would be reapplying as a different zoning district. So they're not in a waiting period.
I mean, and our recommendation would still go forward to the city council. The city council could deny, they could take the annexation, they could deny the rezoning, and then they would come back to us again anyway.
Yeah, if they wanted to. So it's, if they want to bring it forward, either if it has a positive or negative recommendation, that's their decision.
Yeah, and so it's a good point, and for those that may not be up on the workflow there, so it's going to go through here, and whether we pass or deny it, it still goes to city council, right?
Correct.
If we recommend it, then a simple majority at city council would confirm it. If we do not recommend it, then it takes 2/3 or a supermajority of city council to approve it.
Correct.
Okay, so we've got the zoning in front of us. We've got a motion and a second. Any additional discussion before we take a vote?
All right.
I just want to say that since it is commercial, I think I'm fine with, I mean, I know today's not the day for the waiver right to protest, but I'm fine with gravel for the time being, but I don't think it should take much for the city to consider that to be paved, but that's ultimately up to the council. But I just, knowing that it could be commercial, or that we're voting on it being lake commercial, I think paved is better than gravelled that's just wanted that out there.
No other comments? We'll take a roll call vote.
Okay. Hanson,
Yes.
Aletsky, Dolly,
Yes.
Kays,
Yes.
Brink.
Yes.
4 yes, 1 no. That resolution carries, and that will move on to city council with recommendation. We'll move on to item 6B. Mr. Culhane has rejoined the board up here. Brandy, did you want to walk us through? This is a Lakes of Willow Creek Second Edition annexation and zoning.
Yes, thank you, Blake. So this is, as stated, is the Lakes of Willow Creek Second Edition. And if you, let me get this going here. If you recall, the concept plan was before the Plan Commission a couple months ago. And so now we're looking at annexing and zoning the second phase of this development. The first edition is already annexed and zoned and platted. And then, so now we're looking at, wow, all right, where is it? Just scrolling aimlessly. Okay, I was looking for, I was looking for the concept plan in my mind. So, but no, we're annexing and zoning. So this is the petition that shows the different zoning designations that we'll be bringing in. So the first phase was actually all commercial. And then now we do have, this is, the second phase is all residential. So there is R3 multifamily residential along the collector routes. And then it phases into R2 single family attached residential, which is duplexes. And then R1, which is single family district as well. And so this also, these streets will extend up to 3rd Avenue. Again, similar discussion there of,
Brandy, can you zoom in on that? It's really hard to see the difference between the zoning designations without color.
yeah, I can definitely do that. And you guys have the packet in front of you too, right?
But even there in the print packet, it's very difficult to see.
Okay. And actually, so what I'm going to
Maybe
do.
I'll make a comment to Mr. DeYoung in the back there to maybe use some more color in the future. I think this came from you.
They actually don't like color, like, because it's not, like, it's not always identifiable. So hatching is actually.
Or maybe just increase the scale on the hatching pattern. It doesn't print real well at this scale.
Just, yeah, here we go. We'll get the handy dandy technology and get her zoomed in there.
There you go.
These agendas are posted online.
Quick question. So the proposed annexation and the zoning is consistent with what's been approved as in the plan?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. We'll open the public hearing on this. This does have a public hearing today. Is there anybody to speak in the public?
Colin Paulson, representing J&J Land Sales. I'm just here for questions. It's pretty much We have all the utilities already in place. No curb and gutter or asphalt at this time, but it will be coming soon.
And then after annexation and zoning, we'll have the plat come forward with the development agreement, and then that will hold them accountable for finishing the required infrastructure improvements within 2 years of council approval and recording of the plat.
A question on Parkview Trail, and I know we talked about this briefly when we were back doing the full concept review, but that's going to tie into the adjacent development there. What's going to be the construction of that? Is it going to dead end? Is there going to be a turnaround until the other side is created? How are we going to do that?
We'll have a legal turnaround.
Okay.
Suitable for.
Temporary until such time as the connection is made.
And that should happen in the near future.
Okay.
And that will be, so because it's city property there to the west, so I believe on the construction plans that they will extend it all the way to the edge of that city property to the west.
Okay.
And then they will have a turnaround. So then it will be up to the Dakota Commons developer to connect.
To eventually tie into it?
Yep.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Okay. Any other comments from the public?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Brandy, just to that last comment you made, I'm not sure I'm tracking on who's responsible for what in that gap there.
So the construction plans, they will be responsible because they'll have to extend past city property because we're not the ones developing. So then they would have to extend it to past that city property as well. And I'll confirm here, and Colin, you go ahead and speak to that at all if you want. I'll pull up the construction plans just to confirm.
And the strip that we're talking about that the city owns, this is that lot 1, that little narrow strip going north-south?
Correct.
Yeah.
So yeah, here we can already see, and it's very zoomed out again, but this computer is being very slow. I don't know if that has anything to do with the new technology too, Mitch, but that slower than normal. All right, let's see here, which one?
New usually means slower.
What?
Said new usually means slower.
That is too bad. So so they will be responsible for the extension. The city will not be contributing.
Okay, so they'll extend the finished road
Parkview Trail.
over the city property up to the Dakota Commons property line. Where's the turnaround going to be?
We'll have to get an easement with Dakota
Commons.
Commons.
Okay.
Thank you. That helps clarify, Brandy. I appreciate it.
So, Mr. Chair, if you look at the two, I guess my question is Parkview Trail will hook up with Lewis and Clark Trail. Is that's my understanding correct there?
Lewis and Clark runs north and south. Parkview will intersect east and west.
Correct, but those two will adjoin?
Yeah.
And that
They'll
is
intersect.
that is on the concept plan for Dakota Commons showing that connection.
Yep.
So will the streets, I got lost in the street names. The street names are consistent going all the way across then?
Parkview
Yes.
goes all the way to 19.
Okay.
And I would show you, but it won't
I just
pull
pulled
it
it up
up.
on Google. It goes all the way to 19th.
Okay.
Yeah. It,
So this is.
so this is Lewis and Clark, and it runs down here. And then this is Parkview.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure I had it figured out.
And I do expect that that's going to be relatively quickly, that is finished off and fully connected all around. I know they're actively developing over there as well.
It's their next phase.
This item is very similar to the previous item where it's an annexation and zoning. abutting an adjacent street that's half in the city, or will be half in the city, half not in the city, which Third Avenue Northeast. So is that going to be built as a half street, or are we going to have a waiver of the right to protest with that one?
On Third,
Yes.
again, we'll have to assess that.
The question is, would we be smarter to be bringing that full right-of-way in at this point in time? Because right now you have a single owner of property, as a family that owns everything, Kinsman's own everything on that north side.
So,
Wouldn't we be smarter just to get to annex it all the way to the fence line on the north side?
right, so it is a section line right-of-way, and so even if the city were to build the other half of Third, we still could,
Because
but
it'll
we
be a-
wouldn't be
it'll
able
a
to
collector
assess
street. It
it.
will be a collector street, correct?
Yep, but still, you have 33 feet on each side of the center line of the right-of-way, so that will fit a half a street. And then we wouldn't be able to assess it anyway until it was annexed to the north, until the Kinsman would annex.
I know, it gets back to my question, though. I think that we're being short-sighted in the construction of any half-streets, especially Third Avenue, because that is still being utilized by the gravel operations over to the east of this development. And
Yes.
so I think, in my opinion, if we had the opportunity to annex now, we annex now. And again, at some point in time, we're going to be triggering a street construction project on Third Avenue before we're going to be doing the one on the north side of the lake that we just approved. And so I think it's really imperative at us that we grab the land now when we can get it. And I also think it's probably important that we figure out what that policy is moving forward as a city.
And ultimately, that's why I pointed out, I mean, these, item B and item C are, or if I got my letters right, are very different, but they're both annexations and zoning and that include half of a street. You know, the one has no development, the other one has 75 lots of residential. I mean, but that's the same question for both. So that's kind of why I wanted to point it out on both.
And my understanding currently is that township doesn't manage or maintain any of that part of Third Avenue. It's taken care of primarily by the gravel contractor.
Okay, so the
I might
thing
be
though
wrong
with
on that,
the.
but that's the way it used to be anyway.
But with the right-of-way, as far as it's kind of irrelevant because it's already a section line right-of-way. It's irrelevant if we would annex and zone half of the right-of-way or all of it, because it is that until it becomes time to plat. So that's where I'm coming from as far as why we're not bringing in the entire right-of-way. Because it
just-
already exists.
I just want to note too, as the developer, we would still only be responsible financially for half a street.
Be a half a collector street.
Correct.
Yep.
Yep. And that's shown in the construction plans. And then that's where we would need to, so they would be responsible, but then it's a matter of, is it built within 2 years? And is the city going to piggyback with it? Or is it a waiver of right to protest?
So, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
If I may. Yeah, these are all good talking points that we actually hashed out amongst the staff here when contemplating whether to require the half width of Third Avenue or full width. And the points that Brandy made were the ones that kind of shined through on why we landed where we did. But I do fully understand, the benefit of getting it full width right away now is it's done. You don't have anything to deal with. The downside to it is this applicant has to get with another third-party applicant who has nothing to do with this development and get them to sign off on the annexation and the platting in a way that it's just one more thing they've got to do with that's a little bit odd for that third-party owner to have to deal with when they don't understand or necessarily want anything to do with it. So there's pros and cons both ways, and the other downside on why we only took the half width is because it's only a segment of Third. Again, that doesn't necessarily make it right or wrong, but the fact is if we did full width, we'd have full width, but only for this little segment. The rest of it would still be what it is. Definitely pros and cons both ways, and again, this all leads back to what we talked about a couple action items ago about having a policy on this, and unfortunately, we're just not there yet. At least we all recognize we need one, and
It's a good problem. It's a good problem to have.
yeah, the more we talk about it, the more urgent this policy's got to become, and we can put turn the fires up on that getting that established.
Mr. Von in relation to this segment, right, so if we look farther to the west where it's still gravel there along Third and Dakota Commons is to the south there, the way that Dakota Commons is developing, it's specifically set back from Third Avenue as kind of, green space type community, right? So what is going to be the driving, triggering factor to get that full, Third Avenue constructed all the way over?
The progression of this development could certainly tip the scales that way. If this development being proposed right here carries out in a pretty expeditious manner, and there's a lot of residential traffic going out on Third, that could easily tip the scales on needing Third to be built. And what's likely going to happen is it's probably going to have to be a city programmed project, and then assess those costs back to those adjacent property owners. So in this case, at a minimum, what we should be looking at is how we're memorializing for this developer their responsibility for their portion of Third. And maybe Brandy's already got language for the development agreement related to that. Is that the case, Brandy? And how?
What we know is that they are responsible for the half, but we've had different developments using different strategies, I guess we'll say. So I think we'll get that ironed out internally on which route will be the best. But otherwise, we have done all different scenarios. So we'll get something ironed out before the development agreement comes forward, and then that'll come forward to you guys again, so you can see where we landed with it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We'll close the public hearing on that, and then we'll look for a motion on the annexation.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Discussion on annexation. Roll call vote.
Brink.
Yes.
Kays.
Yep.
Dolly.
Yes.
Oletsky.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Colhane.
Yes.
All in favor? That motion carries. We'll move on to the zoning.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on zoning?
No.
Okay, we'll proceed with a roll call vote.
Colhane.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Oletsky.
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Brink.
Yes.
All in favor of that as well, so that motion carries. And we've already taken care of item C on the agenda. We'll move on to item D on the agenda, which is consideration of resolution 2023-17. Brandy?
Yes, thank you, Blake. So this is a condo plat according to our ordinance for the reserve. Let me get there again. Now that I'm all zoomed in here, I gotta. Okay. So the plat of the reserve at Prairie Winds, first addition to the municipality of Watertown. And so typically plats like this is a replat. This is a replat of Outlot X. That has been, do you guys, am I missing something? Oh, okay. Sorry. So this is a replat of Outlot X of Prairie Winds Condominium First Edition. And so as I was saying, typically in our ordinance, this is what we would call a condo plat. However, there's a couple items that are not met, which is let me pull up the staff report here. Okay. So there's typically items A through F are met, and then staff can administratively approve a condo plat. Because the condo plat does not have to follow our subdivision regulations. So the ones that are not met in this plat is that they did not have the word condominium in the name, which we did speak with the Real Estate Commission about, and they are comfortable with that. There's really no reason other than for having it in the title. And then also the plat cannot create public streets. And they are extending 54th Street with this development. So that's why we had have that tied, those improvements, those civil plans are tied to the building permit for these condos or townhouses. So that is why this plat is before you. Otherwise, it does meet all the other requirements of a condo plat. So with that, I'll stand by for any questions.
Point of clarity, Brandy, you say before them, as opposed to being an administrative plat, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay, so an administrative plat, those criteria would be met and staff would administratively sign off on this. But because it doesn't meet a couple of those criteria, it has to come forward to the boards, both planning commission and council.
Vince, do you have anything to say or comments?
I'm just waiting for a 1980 crack.
There you go.
Is 54th Street paved?
It is, and if it's not, it will be before they can have final occupancy on the buildings. And what they are having to do here, because obviously the golf course is to the south, they keep extending 54th to the driveway of the development. Because in theory, it's not going to go further, because I think they'll run into hole 10.
And if it
But
were
that's
ever to
in
go
theory.
further, they would have to take it all the way to the property line?
That's correct. Yep, then they would be responsible for that.
On the first point you made about the condominium being in the name, I was a little confused with the first paragraph where it said the plat entitled Prairie Winds Condominium First Edition. Is that the prior name, and then we're changing the name to what's on?
The reserve.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep, gotcha.
Okay, on the name thing, I know it's a small thing, but as a property appraiser, or if somebody wants to buy it, they might think it's a townhouse, and it's really a condominium. And that makes a big difference on the appraisal form, right down to what you can use as comparables. And that's why if you would have the name condo in it, it would really trigger people to not be confused.
So then this is where I come in. Okay, so the ordinance sets out and calls it a condominium under the ordinance. Correct. Okay? But the operative way that it's set up is as a townhouse. So it's not a registrable condominium under the state statutes. That's part of the misnomer in the city ordinance calling it a condominium plat. I could go on about the apartments Brandy and I and Heath have about the apartment definitions and that type of thing, and that's part of the discussions that you and the council are having. But this is just pigeonholing it into the language of the ordinance, and the condominium is the type of plat as opposed to an actual condominium.
So each homeowner is going to own the inside and the outside of the building, of their unit, or it's going to be, the outside's going to be owned by an association and then they own the inside?
That's where Eric comes in. Okay, so I was defining the difference in the plat. How do you-
And I think to your point too, Bonnie, is where Vince is saying, where it's confusing for your profession, but then it's causing confusion for what they're trying to accomplish by having to call it a condominium when they're going with the townhouse, as far as what they're doing.
So I think you're correct in that they would own the inside and the outside of the unit and the footprint, the land under the footprint of their space. Now, anything, once we get outside of their unit, or, the lot doesn't go all the way to the north and to the south, it's really just the footprint of their building. And
So
we
then
wanted
it would
to,
be like a HOA would be running the road and the lawn and everything, but they would just own their, at the inside and the outside? Okay.
correct.
I've seen that before.
Thank you, guys.
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? I'll take a roll call vote.
Bert wants to talk, sorry. I want to ask Bert a question. Bert, what do you want to tell us?
I know it's a late day, but I didn't think we were going quite that fast. I talked with Eric real quickly about this, as well as Colin back there. The only thing that we would ask is on this plat, we would like to have easements on that north side and the west side as well as what they already have. So we can go all the way around the property. If this gets developed further to the west, who knows, then we have access to our facilities and we can continue to serve over there. That's all we want, is just 10-foot wide easement.
Does that require an amended motion?
Would you like to update your motion and second it?
Better.
Thanks.
Does the applicant have any issues with the suggestion? Thank you.
I would amend my motion to reflect Bert's comments
The easements,
regarding easements on the east and the west.
the west and the north.
West and the north, my apologies, the west and the north. Thank you.
Mr. Brink, do you second that?
I do. I second.
We'll take a roll call vote.
Okay. Brink,
Yes.
Kays, Dolly,
Yes.
Aletsky.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Colhane.
Yes.
It's unanimous, yes. That resolution will move forward. Item 7 on the agenda is the open public comments. We have no public anymore, so we'll move on to new business.
So, and I'm sorry, I did not get this on the agenda, but I do have a 10-minute presentation.
You're
Sure.
I'm kidding, I
You're
don't.
so funny.
You guys.
If you're gonna hit us hard.
I'll move on to item old. And
Or
since-
maybe 18 minutes.
Since you mentioned 10, though, this meeting does mark a decade that I've served on this board.
Congratulations.
Does it
Thank
ever
you
get
for your
any
service.
Flown by, right?
Does it get easier?
Does it get easier?
Maybe a little.
Thank you, Blake. We do appreciate your service.
Yeah.
Could I bring up one thing in new business?
Yes, sir.
We've talked a lot about waiver of right to protest in roads today. Recently, a year ago, we moved, the DOT moved the light at 19th Street, or at 13th Street to 14th Street. So now if you're going to the soccer fields, you turn at the light, and then you go down like 12th or 13th, which are both gravel roads that we've collected a lot of waiver rights to protest on. Is there any thought of making those get paved?
That's a good idea.
I mean, because that's where you get directed to go to the soccer fields, and it's
Yeah.
weird.
And we had talked about some of those in relation to those contractor shops, and they are filling up those lots down there.
I believe we've collected waiver of the rights on all of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, great point. We'll take that into consideration.
Any other new business? Any reason for executive session?
Nope.
I'll adjourn us. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. This is very glitchy. Thanks.